All right, episode 7, Mohit. We didn't know where we will be a couple months ago, but a lot has changed. And today we'll talk about MCP. So I know that about a month ago, MCP was everywhere. It was one of the most viral things on X, on LinkedIn, and across tech blogs. And this isn't new in the AI world. Some news or some launches end up becoming very, very viral. The last time we talked about Ghibli, so we are picking up trends that are gaining traction. And with MCP, I felt it was a bit challenging for me because there was no immediate use case or reward that I could get by using it. It was a bit more technical and I tried keeping up with the buzz, but honestly, I could not wrap my head around it. And at some point, I gave up. So when you suggested let's dig into MCP for this episode, I was a bit hesitant, but I'm glad you pushed for it because once I started learning about it, what MCP actually is, which is Model Context Protocol, and realize like what's happening behind the scenes, it's kind of a big deal. And that's it wasn't very straightforward to learn about it. What was your initial introduction to MCP?
For me, I've been procrastinating learning about MCP for so long. Like it feels like it's been out for an eternity and so much has been going on, and I just felt like I've really not had the opportunity to get into it, and that's why I really wanted us to do an episode on it. And it's been great learning about it. But I also want to say it didn't start well. Guess why I spent some time initially while learning about MCP thinking that it stands for Multi-Agent Communication Protocol.
Yeah, I can see that because agents were also viral at some point, and they still are.
Yeah, but the reason is hallucinations. I did the rookie mistake of trying to learn a new topic from these AI chatbots themselves. I don't know which bot, which AI it was. I think either Claude or ChatGPT, one of them. But I asked about what is MCP and all kinds of results. Obviously, it's really common, like medium chain polysaccharides is one of them. Then I asked, what is MCP in the context of AI agents? That should have been enough. And very confidently, one of them was, like, it stands for Multi-Agent Protocol. Sorry, Multi-Agent Communication Protocol. And very confidently, it gave me a lot of information about that. So that threw me off. And then at some point I was like, wait, this doesn't really sound right. Nothing I'm reading about is really making sense. So I went to another one of them and I asked the same question. And I got something completely different. What did I get? Memory, cognition, and planning. And I was like, no, this is not working. I finally went to something which had internet search. I think I went to Perplexity, and that gave me at least the correct expansion of the acronym. And that is Model Context Protocol. So despite that little bumpy start, it's been really great learning about it. But yeah, we don't hallucinate on the Product Espresso podcast. So let's get into it. What is MCP?
Yeah, I'm looking up my own ChatGPT history, and I also got different explanations when I was just using the word MCP. And this is also maybe a learning for us because as we are utilizing these tools, it's important to remember that you can't just accept the first output it gives you. You have to review the work, you have to provide the context, and I know there's a whole another piece which is just like they call evals. I know Lenny did a feature on that, which is like as product managers, as you're using these tools, you have to get very good at reviewing the work, providing it context to make sure that the output is directly applicable, because oftentimes, as we learned in this case, it's not. And even for me, as I said, researching wasn't straightforward. I had to learn things, then I had to unlearn certain things because beyond these AI tools, explanations online were either overly simplified or just purely wrong. And in the episode, we'll try to break it down from what our learnings were, how it works, as well as why it matters, and also where the industry is heading. So I'll share my view. Correct me where you feel like I've also gone to an extreme and then making stuff up. I'm also hallucinating. But yeah, MCP is Model Context Protocol, and it is an open standard. It's a universal standard that allows AI systems to connect with different services, different tools, and external data sources. So the way I've understood is that if I have a use case, then instead of building custom integrations for every tool or every data set, developers can now use this shared language, this shared protocol to let AI agents tap into different systems in a secure and standardized way. So I think the main takeaway is it's a standard protocol, it's open, it's universal, so it simplifies integration across multiple tools, multiple data sets. And in certain ways, it reminds me of like the REST API standard, which I learned a couple years ago, where when we started building APIs, there was no standard, so which required custom integration, custom build, and that works, that's functional, but it takes much longer. Once you have standard, it's a common language, and MCP is doing the same for AI systems. As you said, it was launched last year, so it was launched by Anthropic in late 2024. So it started as a Claude ecosystem, and their idea was make something open, make something universal, because in that way we can grow the entire ecosystem and we can learn to work together. And the real reason this was launched was, I touched upon this a little bit, which is we had incredibly smart AI models that, of course, were built over the years. And so far, the investment had been improving these models, improving their reasoning, improving their generation capabilities. But to access this information, it was very hard. And one example that I found very useful was emails. What I had been using these ChatGPT for instance, was like, if I want to send an email and I want it to be a professional email, I would either go to ChatGPT to draft an email, which could be it's draft something for me from scratch, or I would like give it an input of my thoughts, and then it would use that and check for grammar, check for the tone, check for my confidence level. But then I would have to take that email and then go into my Gmail and send it. Like, it was great for summarizing the content, reviewing the content, but it did not have the capability to send an email on my behalf. MCP unlocks that. It has figured out how to remove that bottleneck of not just being like someone who's like reviewing your work. You can use the interface that MCP introduces and send an email. So the vision is that you can go into Claude, for instance, and say send an email to this person from my personal email, and it can do that. It can like look up your contacts, it can look up your text, it can draft an email and also send an email for you.
I think that the most important thing to understand about MCP is that it's a standard and it's not a new technology. Nothing that MCP does is something which wasn't possible before. Everything was possible. But the key to ushering in more innovation comes from that standardization. And so, like you said, that having that standardized layer has so many benefits. It gives developers the benefits of integrating faster and just having less custom building to do. And I was trying to think of an analogy for MCP. And since we talk about fintech so much on this podcast, the only thing that I could come up with that was similar to MCP is open banking. And I do realize for a lot of people, it'll be like the analogy of open bank is more complicated than understanding MCP. But still, there are parallels between the two, because open banking is another effort to standardize. It's an effort to make it easier to connect to financial data, which is residing in these silos with these big banks. And MCP does a very similar thing. It's trying to extract data from these silos and make it way easier for agent builders to be able to access that data, for that agent to be able to go out and get the data from these different service providers. And thinking about the benefits of MCP, I think if we zoom out to a more higher level, I think MCP creates this kind of abstraction that allows agent builders to focus on more like high level thinking. Essentially, you can now think about, hey, here's what I want you to do. Here's the MCP server. So here's the data and tools that you will need access to. And it's so easy to connect that you don't have to think about it much. And then you don't get lost in the low level thinking and the technicalities, and you don't get lost in the weeds of building that agent and giving it access to everything that it needs to do its job. So that's at a high level, taking the future of the entire knowledge work industry to the next level. It's a really technical topic, but we also don't want it to be a black box. So I think next we should talk about what MCP looks like from within. What's the architecture? What are the different components? So shall we open up that black box?
Let's do it, so that way it doesn't sound very theoretical. Let's see what's behind the scenes.
Yeah, okay. So let's first briefly talk about the architecture of MCP. Essentially, it's three components. You have host applications, you have MCP servers, and you have MCP clients. Host applications are your user-facing AI applications. This is the application which has the LLM, for example, Bolt. You could be using Cursor, Windsurf, Claude Desktop. These are all AI applications that use AI agents. to get the job done. When these AI agents need access to external tools and the application needs access to external data, that's where MCP servers come in. So they do the stuff outside of the training data and the model weights of the LLM, like to do maybe an internet search or image generation, or you want to fetch data from a database. Those applications need to build MCP servers. MCP servers are built by the part that's external, the part that's trying to send data to the agent. Now, an interesting thing here is it could be an internal service or it could be an external service. An internal service could be like a local data source. Maybe the agent wants access to a local database, maybe a Postgres database that's running locally, or maybe you wanted to give it access to your own file system and make the agent make some changes to the files on your computer. So those are internal services. Those can also be exposed to your AI agent with MCP servers. And external agents are obviously your external tools, your search tools, Slack, Google Calendar, image generation, all of that. Now, where MCP clients fits into this is MCP clients is the part of your host application which is going to connect to that MCP server. So your broader host application has within it a lot of stuff. One of them is that little AI agent, as the LLM, and you also now would build the MCP client, and this MCP client would then connect to those MCP servers. So the key points here, MCP clients, they reside within the host application, and I had to dig into the nature of the connection between the MCP clients and servers a little bit. There is some conflicting information, but I believe from whatever I've read, MCP clients and MCP servers maintain a one-to-one connection. So for each service, if you want to connect to Slack, you have an MCP client that connects to Slack, and you would have multiple little MCP clients that you would run within your application to connect to multiple different services. But with that broader architecture, I think one thing that I want to point out is MCP itself is really a full-fledged communication protocol. It's not like a high-level abstraction. One common misconception could be that MCP clients and MCP servers just behind the scenes are doing these traditional API calls, and MCP is just handling like the higher level communication standards between AI agents and these tools. That's not the case. MCP effectively replaces API calls, and it actually extends the capability limitations of APIs for AI-driven workflows. And so your earlier comparison with REST and these API protocols was actually really spot on, because you have to think about MCP like you think about REST and SOAP protocols, because one big reason MCP was required in the first place was because the AI community needed to rethink fundamentally what sort of communication patterns are required between a client and server to support these multi-step tasks that AI agents need to perform. And so they had to think about things like persistence of the connection between the two systems, whether it needs to remember previous requests and responses between the system, which is called state. So does it need to maintain state? And so a quick comparison would be REST-based communication is stateless. SOAP-based communication is primarily stateless, but it can be made stateful if you need. You can track previous requests and responses as well if you wanted to. When it comes to MCP, MCP is primarily stateful because that's what's required for these AI workflows. And it's primarily stateful, but in the future, maybe there would be some support for stateless calls for like some short-lived communication use cases. But yeah, all that is to say that MCP is kind of a pretty big deal, and it's really the evolution of APIs to support our AI future.
Yeah, I like the fact that you said like, this is not just like a tool, or I don't know if this is a tool, but like the concept itself is not just for engineers to understand, because it's truly reshaping how we think about experiences altogether. And I like the fact that you called out that it is replacing API. And then the way I'm understanding is that it's not just introducing best practices, which would make communication easier and enable scalability, which are the end outcome, but it's the APIs. So if I think Slack, for example, in addition to Slack building APIs for people to extract data or integrate, Slack Slack is now also going to be building MCP servers. And maybe in the long term, we don't have APIs, we only have MCP servers. But I'm also curious, like, is it only available for like certain companies? Is it only available for certain agents? Like, what are the different ways this could be used?
Yeah, so another misconception I read about MCP is that it's only about tool use. That is, don't get me wrong, like, tool use is the primary kind of use case of MCP. It's going to be the most common reason why people look into MCP. So to answer your question, yes, any service which wants to expose its data to AI agents. So that could be like Slack. It could be, I heard recently Atlassian has also built an MCP server. So now your agent can manage and track your tickets in Jira and your information in Confluence. So that is the primary use case. There are also a couple of other things, with more things being added in the future. But one of them is this thing called resources. So MCP gives you access to tools, but it also gives the application access to resources, which are essentially files and could be data in a database, which are to be used by the host application. Like I said earlier, there's a host application, within that your little AI agent with the LLM, and then you have MCP clients. But that host application itself has a lot of logic, and sometimes there are use cases where it would require access to some files and data from the MCP server. So that is also something MCP enables. It also enables access to prompt templates. So, and your AI application can fetch some prompt templates from the MCP server, and these are to be used by the user, because it's the user that does the prompting for the agent. So the host application can fetch these. The MCP server can sort of expose these prompt templates, maybe to like help better use that service. There could be a number of use cases. So broadly today, MCP has these three features. It's tools for the AI, for the LLM model to use. It's resources for the AI application to use, and it's prompt templates for the user to use. So they've put a lot of thought and effort into this protocol, and I think it shows. The response from the industry clearly shows that the effort has paid off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was like the main question that comes to mind is like Claude is coming up with this protocol. Of course, they put a lot of thought behind it. They release it, and was the effort worth it or not? It was definitely worth it, because there's been a strong response from the industry. Like if you look at the multiple MCP clients, there's MCP servers, there's almost like a marketplace for MCPs now. And even earlier this year, OpenAI and their support for MCP, which was a huge moment, because if you go back a couple years, OpenAI introduces ChatGPT, and slowly like these LLMs were like becoming accessible to the public, to the wider audience. And of course, Anthropic and OpenAI are competitors in many ways. And now these major LLM players are not just competing, but they're willing to converge on shared practices, shared infrastructure. So when they announced the support, that was great milestone for the tech industry, for the AI ecosystem. And the developer community has followed too, because I came across this example website, not the web example website, it's an actual website, mcpserverfinder.com, which is an open directory for MCP compatible endpoints. So you can just, if you are like thinking about like exploring MCP, you can go into mcpserverfinder.com and you can search, browse different MCP servers available. So it's been like a great response. And now as of today, there are like multiple MCP clients available. Like, so you have Claude, you have OpenAI, you have like LibreChat, you have hundreds, if not more, MCP servers available, including from Notion and Slack and Agent Desk, like Zendesk. And so you are seeing that this ecosystem is slowly being built following the protocol that was set, and this is gonna just unlock the different way of like us building products. And one thing is to say that MCP is here to stay, because it was launched a couple of months ago. Now everyone has been following, from like being an AI company like OpenAI to productivity tools to like specific tools like say Grafana, which are like monitoring and observability. So I'm excited to like where we are heading in the future, just based on like how the progress we have made in a matter of months since this protocol was launched.
Surprising how collaborative these competitors have been, right? It's almost heartwarming to see how well they've been kind of rallying around MCP. And credits to Anthropic. They've been really tactful in how they've approached this. They've made it, obviously, it's an open source project. Even the official website doesn't point to Anthropic. It's not like anthropic.com/MCP or anything like that. It's modelcontextprotocol.io. So the protocol itself takes center stage, and it doesn't have too many references to Anthropic in the documentation either. It's only where they're giving examples for how to use it. They would obviously refer to Anthropic's models. So they wanted this to be adopted. It makes sense. It's a standard. You want people to adopt it. So they didn't use it as a marketing ploy, and kind of launched it in a public service kind of way. So credits to them, and credits to the competitors for getting on board so quickly. Google's recent announcement of their agent-to-agent protocol prominently mentions MCP and mentions that this protocol would complement MCP, and we would just go on for hours if we try to talk about every single protocol out there. But I think we just cannot get away without at least mentioning the agent-to-agent protocol. So maybe we touch upon it very quickly in brief. So I want to mention a couple of key points when it comes to MCP versus A2A. And the first is there is no MCP versus A2A. It's two protocols that really complement each other. And MCP connects an agent to external tools and resources, whereas agent-to-agent protocol connects various sub-agents within a broader agent context. The vision is that you would eventually have multi-agent systems, right? You'll have one agent, it might be like the orchestrator, something which kind of plans the work and then hands it off to these little specialized sub-agents. So that's where agent-to-agent protocol comes in. It enables the agent to connect multiple various sub-agents which can reside on external systems. So really, the whole talk of protocol wars such is a little far-fetched. There are no two major protocols today I see which are really competing with each other in the AI. They're all building protocols which complement each other and do something slightly different that would actually make the entire ecosystem better and can be used in conjunction with each other.
Yes, and I think there are different protocols, as you said, and perhaps we can talk a little bit about what all is it unlocking. We did touch upon that a little bit with some examples that we mentioned, but in closing, it'll be good to share our thoughts on where things are heading. And I have two ways of looking at it. One is I envision a future where I can go into ChatGPT or Claude and say I want to send an email. I'll go back to my email example. I want to be able to say send an email using my work email to certain people, but also say send an email to my personal email. So I think the way I think about it is if I have to send an email, I need to see is it personal or professional. I have to draft an email and then send the actual email. But I can easily using these servers, if they're accessible, I can go in and go to Claude and say, go to my Notion, summarize my meeting notes, and using my professional email, send an email.
That's the dream.
Yeah, that's the dream. So I think that's my take on it. And then the second piece is I also feel this is in many ways creating a connection layer between the AI focused companies. So again Claude, SourceGraph, Cursor, these companies are AI focused companies, and then you had the traditional companies which were doing things in the non-AI ways. But this brings it together. So for enterprises, it's important to think about when and how can we start building MCP servers that these clients can connect to. So that's one of the biggest takeaways for me is it creates that connection layer. And because for the longest time we thought that, hey, yes, AI is great, it has many benefits, but it's going to be a long time before enterprises start adopting it. That changes it with MCP, because now as long as you're a bigger company, if you have an MCP server, you can easily be integrating with MCP client. You talked about that last news which they made recently. So I think that is telling me this is no longer just personal use. You are going to see enterprise adoption of AI happen at a much faster scale than people envision.
Yeah, and just thinking about the future that MCP is trying to usher in, I think in terms of building agentic products, their roadmap is, first of all, full of really cool ideas. They want MCP servers to become more intelligent. So there's this concept of MCP servers making like inference calls, which basically calls to the LLM on the MCP client side. And I read about this concept of composability, where the MCP servers can also function as MCP clients. So now it's not like MCP client connecting to an MCP server. It's like MCP client server combinations connecting to each other, and then you can like chain them up. So an MCP server can do some of the job and then act as an MCP client and call in another external service and fetch some other data from them, and you could sort of like chain them up. Like really cool ideas and concepts that they want to bring in. But in terms of designing these agentic products, I think we're going to just building that agent and not really constraining it with tools so much. So at runtime, users can then add capabilities to the agent, can connect the tools that they want. So maybe your data is in Google Drive, or maybe it resides in Confluence. Like the user can decide what tools to connect to the agent. How do you communicate? Slack, Discord, you can choose. And so that, I think that's the intermediate step, because there's another vision where it's like really left to the agent, and these agents can just go out there. It can be assigned a task, and they can go out there and discover what capabilities exist themselves and really fetch the right tool for the right job and connect it themselves using MCP. So yeah, I think my closing thought here is we're really talking about the future of knowledge work as a whole. It's like where you decide what needs to be done, and then you figure out which AI agent or specialized AI agents you want to delegate that work to, and they go ahead and get it done. And I think with the level of abstraction that MCP is enabling, I can sort of see that future on the horizon. It's in sight.
Yeah, it's already reshaping the AI ecosystem, the AI agent ecosystem, and maybe this is a bit of my naiveness in my learnings of MCP right now, because I haven't thought about like the challenges that are out there that need to be addressed before this continues to scale. But this is definitely representing a shift in how we build things, how we consume things, and I'm sure like how we monetize things. But excited to see where the developers, the enterprises, the market takes the possibilities of MCP, and it's going to be game changing for sure. So perhaps we come back in a few weeks, in a few months, and do a review of where things are at.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, don't get lost in hallucinations. And Google still lives on.
I think that's the best way to end it. Yes, don't get lost. We've been using these topics to learn ourselves and share it with folks who are our audience, a few subscribers. But I feel like even choosing these topics and like this podcast has been a learning for me as well. So with that we can end. Over and out.